Brandon, do we have any questions?
We do. So we have a question from Charlene. Charlene's question is, has federal legalization in Canada curbed the illicit market in any way?
It certainly has, absolutely. I think that the last statistics, and sort of take these with a grain of salt, because it's very hard to quantify, like, are people actually shopping in the illicit market? Because I think the motivation is always to conceal that information, because, like, if you're breaking the law, do you really want to tell the person who's serving you that you're doing so? My understanding is that about 50% of the products are currently being purchased in the legal market, and about 50% of the products from the illicit market. I do expect that trend to continue to go downwards in favor of the people purchasing products from the legal market. And that honestly just comes down to the fact that it's just, from a pragmatic standpoint, the products are cheaper. And if the products are cheaper and there's less risk associated with it, I think over time, anyone who's new to consuming cannabis will likely purchase from one of the existing stores. That said, there's still going to be a pretty large cohort of consumers, the legacy consumers, who purchase the product from their buddy, their friend who they went to high school with, simply because they have that relationship and it's convenient. So it definitely will take a lot of time before we get to the 100%, like we see with alcohol. However, I think all trends point to progress being made.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I'm here in the East Coast of the United States, where we are still in archaic laws where it's not legal in any way, shape, or form. And the number one thing you see around here is cookies products, right? So it's not being sold at the dispensary; it's making its way over here. So it's a really interesting kind of development to see, people that did purchase it from, like you said, their buddy or their friend. Now it's like, oh, we got the package with the Gary Payton on it or whatever, So it's an interesting development. And, there's a big demand for the things they can't access, the edibles, the drinks, the beverages, those other products that, like, no one's going to make hard booze in their house. So that's why I still think people, they go to the store, they buy it, that's convenient. Right. And so I think that will continue to grow. And once that opens up, it'll be a floodgate. The other question we had was from Jackson. And Jackson said, why do you think the federal laws in the states are moving slower than in Canada's? Any thoughts behind that at all?
Great question.
It's a really good question.
If we could only see inside the minds of our politicians.
Yeah, I mean, immediately once the question was asked, that the first thing that stands out, and I'd love to get your collective perspectives on this one, is the fact that America is borderline a continent as opposed to being a nation. I almost view, like, each state as being like its own sovereign nation, and, like, people are just so different from the East Coast to the West Coast to the Midwest to what's happening up north. Whereas in Canada, like, generally for the most part, there's probably a much sort of larger consensus that cannabis needed to be legalized. And the individual who sort of championed that cause was himself someone who probably consumed cannabis, whereas, like, my perception as sort of an outsider looking in is that a lot of the people in the States who are in positions to potentially enact this legislative change are from, like, the boomer generation. Like, nothing against people who are of that sort of demographic, but nonetheless, they were thought that, like, cannabis is the devil's lettuce. Like, it is roots in hell, as the campaign said. So I feel like there's a lot for them to overcome from an education standpoint, such that they can simply see cannabis for what it is. Whereas it just so happened to be someone who was, like, a little bit younger in Canada, who probably didn't grow up with that sort of the same stigma, managed to be the champion of this cause. So, like, inevitably, cannabis is going to be legalized on a federal level in the States. Like, I can say that with absolute certainty. I would bet every dollar I have in my bank account that will happen in my lifetime. I just don't know when that's going to happen per se. If I was to take if I was to wager a bet, I'd likely say it's probably going to be the Republicans who enact that legislative change versus the Democrats, which I think is sort of an unpopular opinion for the most part. However, I just don't see the Democrats pushing it through. I think there's too much sort of internal divisions as to what that looks like, and do they optimize for social equity, or do they just try and, like, optimize for getting the Safe Banking Act through the various houses? So that's my 2 cents, but I'd love to defer to yourselves to get your opinions.
I'm going to say something. Hold on, about the younger boomers. I do think the younger boomers probably are supporting cannabis. It's right. The older boomers, right? That's a pretty big swath. But I hear what you're saying. I think you're right. Those of us who grew up in the 60s and 70s, a little bit different than people who grew up in the 40s and 50s, honestly, right?
Yeah. I think there's people from the 40s that think, what's that movie that came out in the 30s?
Yeah, Reefer Madness.
They think it's a documentary. You know what I mean? It's like, hang on a second. It's the same people that believe all the Netflix documentaries now. So I guess a question too. I mean, just kind of curious here. I mean, do you see this kind of entrenched segment of the Canadian market where they kind of define legacy users or legacy cultivators versus kind of newer to market? I'm even seeing that vernacular being phrased with users now, where you're almost like, I don't want to say less than, but there's a perception that you're better because you decided to use cannabis prior to legalization. Do you see that occur?
We do, and I have a particular distaste for that distinction because, like, let's be honest, we're all fighting the same cause here. Like, take a step back. Cannabis remains illegal in 99% of nations around the world for adults. I'm currently in Ireland as we record this. Cannabis is illegal as heroin. And how crazy is that for people like ourselves who consume this product, truly understand its safety profile, and yet we're creating these like artificial divisions in the cannabis industry such that we can go to war with one another based upon when one was consuming cannabis before the other person. Like, great, you consumed cannabis 10 years ago. That's fantastic. Good for you. And I hope it's been providing you value all along the way. But just because I'm discovering the benefits of cannabis today does not make me any less than you in the context of cannabis. And I think the sooner we can just dissolve those divisions, the better, because as I said, we're all fighting the same cause and there's no need for us to be divided. I'm not going to go down the route of people want us to be divided. I honestly just think it's something we need to solve for ourselves and just say, you know what, just focus on the big picture here, which is that there is so much progress left to be made. And if you were, you know, someone who has put yourself in harm's way, you potentially were incarcerated because you were trying to, you know, push forward the cannabis movement, I commend you and I will celebrate you. However, I'm still going to celebrate the person who's doing that today. And that's my like 2 cents on it, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Very well said.
I mean, I'll just say that it seems like many folks who spend a large part of their adult life fighting a fight, now that there's not a fight to fight, they want to create a fight. You know, It's almost like the drama has benefited them in some way. And, you know, I don't want to generalize everyone, but I do see a little bit of that, like kind of hanging on to it. You know, we worked with some Northern California folks and we pointed to them and we said, hey, see that Chardonnay bus that says, you know, butter Chardonnay on it? That's what you guys need to go towards if you're really trying to make life-changing money. They didn't want to do that. That wasn't their version of legal cannabis. And so that's been really challenging, I think, is that a lot of the, not power, but the direction has been removed from them. And so that's created a bit of a disconnect. So, yeah, I mean, that's super interesting. This has been a very fantastic conversation.
It is. So just to respect everybody's time, you know, I think we will wrap it up. Thank you so much, Matthew. It's been very interesting talking to you. We'd love to have you on again. I'm sure there's so many conversations we could have, but I'd invite anybody who's listening, you know, if you want to take this conversation, continue it, reach out. We're all online on LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about ProCanna, you can visit our website, which is procanna-usa.com. And if you'd like to learn more about the green paper, Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we dropped the link in the comments section. So
yeah, I will do that. I forgot, but I'm about to do the link. I was looking at comments and engaging, but I'll drop it in there.
Okay,
much appreciated.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yep, of course. We appreciate you, Matthew.
Yeah.
Looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah.
Have a good day, everybody.
All right. Take care. Bye.